Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, dear visitors. This week for me was kind of dedicated to microservices and serverless architecture topics. It all started when we brought this topic on our backend chapter meeting at work. There we spent almost an hour discussing worst and best practices of both. Later this week, I have read a few articles of one author, which I found really useful, especially if you're on a point in your company when microservice architecture have to be introduced, or you're just thinking where to start and how to avoid common pitfalls. These articles cannot be the only source of truth, since they have some questionable things or just things which are not covered at all. But anyway, they deserve your attention, and let me start from the first one. As I told you, they're both from the same author, or to be honest, I don't remember the author name, but I remember the company. So they are both from the same company. The company name is Binaris, and I didn't discover yet their product, but as far as I understand, it's something like they provide a service like AWS Lambda or Google Cloud Functions. So let's start with articles. The first one's name is How to Go All In with Serverless Adoption. It is a guide of 10 things you should keep in mind. Some of them are kind of obvious, but still it's worth to remind yourself about them. First advice is start with why. This advice is useful in any aspect of your life, not only at work. From adoption of serverless framework to something more serious like getting married. Serverless brings us a tremendous advantage, but at the same time new problems which you may not be ready to cope with yet. So think twice before jumping in, read more, experiment, and have a clear understanding why. The second advice is applicable not only to serverless but also to microservice architecture. It says start with low-risk business areas. If you're migrating to microservice architecture or introducing a serverless concept, it's worth to start with tiny steps, migrating the most isolated, the less coupled, and better even like asynchronous parts of your application, especially those which are kind of okay to fail, at least at start. Because it may happen that from the moment you deploy it first time to the moment it works flawlessly, a couple of weeks may pass. The third advice sounds like prototype, learn, repeat. I can rephrase it as never take something for granted, always experiment. There are many questions you will come across your journey, from something like which business logic piece to segregate to like which event stream to pick. There is no right answer suitable for everyone. Read the documentation, try, experiment, and pick the right one for your particular case. The fourth advice is finally a little bit techy, but still pretty broad. It sounds continuous delivery. Yeah, that's it. Like it's not an advice, it's just a statement. Continuous delivery. Oh, I love this word and the way people are trying to build it in their companies. Anyway, continuous delivery worth your time and money investments. If you're already in production, especially, and you want to iterate fast enough, most likely you want to iterate fast enough. The fifth advice is very interesting by me. I didn't adopt it yet. I'm not sure will I or not, but still it's worth to think about it. It is about automated testing. It is again only two words, statement, automated testing. But the author states that when you are going serverless, you should rethink your testing pyramid. You should rethink your testing pyramid. If previously it looked like many unit tests, some integration tests, and tiny acceptance tests, now it should look like many acceptance tests, some integration tests, in just a few unit tests. Why is it so? Because your unit tests cannot catch issues like your message queue screwed up and your messages in there are in different order, or some of your microservices doesn't respond at all, or responds with a huge timeout, with a huge delay. Please don't take this approach for granted, but it still makes sense to rethink your testing strategy. The next advice addresses a real pain in the ass for everyone who is going to serverless. It stands for build observability. With Lambda functions, you cannot use any more cool features, cool tools like New Relic agent, for example. So you should come up to something different, which will make your Lambdas debuggable, observable. For AWS infrastructure, this tool can be an X-ray, AWS X-ray service. From checking your request the whole way from start to the bottom. And Elastic Logstash for storing and analyzing your logs. The author also gives some more elaborate answer to this question with some examples and particular advices. So if you're planning this part of your application right now, it's worth to go and check it out. The seventh advice is just one word: security. Nothing new. Use AWS AM roles with the principle of least privilege. Test your dependency on security vulnerabilities, and so on. The next three advices are also pretty generic, and I will just mention them. They are continuous learning, experimenting and trying new, and build some solid standards in your company, which teams must obey, and automate as much as possible. The link for this article is in show notes. Next article name is How to Migrate Existing Monolith Application to Serverless. And it's a list again! Yeah, I love this author. List-based guides are the best. The first advice stands for reverse the Conway's law. Conway's law stands for, one moment, organizations are bound to produce software that resemble their organizational communication structures. And the reverse of the principle means that you should start changing your company structure. You should start building small commands, small teams, like from Amazon principle to pizza-sized team. So tiny teams which will operate more or less independently. It is questionable, like many other advices, but still it has a grain of truth. The second advice is extremely practical, and I even will quote a part of it. You should follow these principles in order to build decoupled microservice-oriented or serverless architecture. Services are autonomous, services have clear boundaries, services own their data and they are authoritative sources for this data. Services are loosely coupled through shared contract and schema. All clear? Services are autonomous. You can deploy them autonomously, for example. Services have clear boundaries. They don't share any logic among them. Services own their data and they are authoritative source for this data. You can obviously duplicate some data. That's not a big deal. For example, if you have few microservices related to users, you may have user information in all of them, but either all of them will store some piece of this information or they will duplicate some part in the way they want to store it. Yeah, and the fourth one is services are loosely coupled through shared contract and schema. Yeah. Also, he mentions a very important idea which people sometimes forget about. Services boundaries does not have to be the same as domain entities boundaries, domain object boundaries. Don't create user microservice, shopping cart microservice, and shopping item microservice. Instead, try to think from point of functions or areas you have, such as authentication, search, order, and so on. Next advice is about code structure, code-based organization. Author advocates for multiple small repos against monorepo. It's questionable, people are discussing it, people are arguing about it. Anyway, feel free to check it out in his blog post. What does he advise this? And I can just add one suggestion as well, which we adopted in our company. We name it microverse pattern. In this pattern, you combine some Lambda functions in one repository, which you can deploy at once. For example, if they are kind of related to the same business concept, related to the same not entity, but the same piece of business process. Next important, but so obvious advice is keep your functions simple. It basically has two ideas. First one is have a descriptive standard naming, and the second is follow single responsibility principle, SRPs. Yeah, it appeared, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, this principle is still valuable. And following this advice will pay you back quickly when you will have new joiners. The last important advice I want to highlight is that you should carve out your monolith parts by tiny pieces and always try to have a graceful migration mechanism, like releasing toggles, like release toggles behind the old API. Like all your requests still goes to the same API, to the old API, but beneath that you have some release toggle which then redirects traffic, not redirects, but sends traffic either to the old monolith business logic part or to your new Lambda functions or microservices. And then when you feel more confident that your microservice or Lambda functions piece works reliably, you can send more traffic here, like decreasing this part to 10%, or you can just remove it at all and just forwarding everything to your new microservice or serverless part. Then when you feel 100% confident that it works perfectly, you can start separating this API part also to the new API. There are a few more advices author gives, but I am out of time. So if they're interesting for you, definitely you should visit the blog of this guy. It's awesome. He also wrote a book. I didn't check it out yet, but I will definitely do this soon. And the link is in show notes again. And this is it for me for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check my blog. I have a few articles about serverless there as well. I will mention them in the show notes as usual. Also, I will appreciate your likes, or I will be even more happy if you will buy me a cup of coffee using the link in the same show notes blog, or a bottle of wine, but unfortunately I don't have such a button there. But I love wine and I love coffee as well. Have a beautiful day or week or month or year, and a great time with serverless. See you soon.